Okay, is this thing working? Let's do a quick audio check. Looks like we have audio. Okay, so welcome to AL Vibe Coding, where I try to vibe code all things AL. And Journey 5, this journey, is a lesson about what to do when the vibe coding doesn't work and you get yourself into trouble and you have a hard time fixing it because you're a vibe coder. You're not a seasoned AL developer. And even a seasoned AL developer may have these scenarios where it just gets stuck and they're having to troubleshoot and debug and figure out how to fix this. So I'll offer a few suggestions. I don't have a magic formula, but let's take a look and give it a try and see what we can figure out. So let me get oriented here. Let's switch over to, let's do a few slides first. So we're all about embracing the vibes and joining Andre Karpathy in vibe coding, and it's been pretty phenomenal. But a while back, I got into a situation where my vibe coded app just didn't work. And I thought, oh, no problem, there's an error, fix it. Well, it couldn't fix it. No matter what I tried, I could not vibe code my way out of this problem. The tool simply didn't know what to do. So what do we do then? How do we fix it if the vibe coding, the AI agent gets stuck and it cannot solve the problem? What do we have available? I was sweating, seriously sweating and nervous for a little while here. Okay, so let's take a look at channel 4 here. There we go. And, oh, well, this will be an interesting challenge because I'm going to try to intentionally cause GitHub Copilot to fail. I'm going to ask it to do something in AL that, based on over 20 attempts, it has been completely incapable of doing this. Maybe today will be its lucky day and it'll make a fool of me. But let's see. I've been unable to get it to do this successfully. And boy, I have tried. Okay, so let's go back to channel 4 here. And here we have basic ALGO project. It's already set up. There's no code in here. And it's pointing to my vibe environment, my vibe sandbox. So I don't have anything set up here. I just did symbols. That's it. Empty project, right? And here I have my vibe sandbox. So we're ready to go. So here's our prompt. I would like to create a Business Central AL extension. Let me see if I can make this bigger for you. Add an action button named Export to Excel to the sales order document page. Pretty simple so far, right? The action button will call a custom Export to Excel cursor. Oh, let me fix that. I was testing with cursors, so that's why that's there. It will call a custom Export to Excel code unit. The code unit will save data of the currently open sales order document to an Excel workbook with 2 worksheets. Pretty simple, right? Header and lines. Header worksheet will have these sales order fields. It doesn't matter what fields you export, just pick a few. The lines worksheet will have these sales order line fields. Again, pick some fields. It doesn't really matter. Please make the sales order list page 9305 the startup object ID in the launch.json. That's just for my sanity, so I'm not constantly switching back. My usual close. Please let me know if you have any questions or need any additional information. So we're going to hop over to VS Code with GitHub Copilot. We have an empty project. I'm going to choose agent mode with Quant Sonnet 4.5. And we'll see if this fails just like the 20 plus other times I've tried this. Paste it in and a little nervous. Let's see what happens. Hit enter. Here we go. So it's going to confidently dive into the code. I'll create the necessary files for your AL extension. Thank you. Okay, so it's changing my startup object ID. Awesome. Excellent. Now I don't see a source code folder, but oh, I got to hit allow. Okay, great. Now it's going to track to-do items. Now there have been some significant updates to Visual Studio Code. I don't know whether that is going to, make a fool of me here, but let's see. I spent hours fighting with this in the past, and it would always fail. So let's see what it does here. And you would think this would be a pretty simple thing to code in AL. Like we as humans understand an Excel file, two worksheets, what's the problem? There's the Excel table buffer in Business Central AL. Like it's certainly capable, right? Well, this made me question my sanity and whether AL could even do this. And it was very, very interesting. So it says, great, I've successfully created your extension. I created this page extension. I've created export sales order to Excel code unit. And that's interesting. Export sales order to Excel code unit. I called it export to Excel code unit. Minor, but gives you a clue what's going on here, right? Header worksheet, lines worksheet generates a file name based on the sales order, opens the Excel file automatically after creation. Okay, so let's give this a try. Let's click on keep and let's YOLO, Control F5. Let's publish this and see what happens. Okay, great. Opens to the sales orders list page. We're off to a good start. I'm just going to choose the sales order that is on the bottom here. Doesn't really matter. Now I would like to have more than one line just in case that matters. So let's choose a Paris guest chair black and let's do quantity 2. Okay, so here we are. We've got our sales order and let's see where it put the button. I didn't specify. Okay, we may have to ask. There we go. It put it under Actions, Export to Excel. And that does not show up under Home, Prepare. Okay, so it's not a promoted menu item, I guess. So Actions, Export to Excel. Fine. That's a whole nother discussion of the action location. Let's click on Export to Excel. How hard could this be? What do you know? That's kind of odd. Okay, bugs happen, right? Could not create Excel workbook. Okay, no problem. This happens all the time when we're vibe coding. We get errors, syntax errors. Very common in the first round, certainly. So I'm going to copy these error details, click on OK, and I'm going to paste it back and tell Copilot Claude Sonnet that we have an error. Error message, could not create Excel workbook, blah, 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 Excel buffer, code unit, export sales order, export to Excel, on action, trigger, failed. Okay, we just paste in the error. We don't even need to explain what's going on. It reads the error and figures it out. The error is occurring trying to export. I see the issue. The Excel buffer requires a different approach for creating multiple worksheets. Okay, I don't know the Excel buffer. I'm just a vibe coder, so let's see what happens. Apparently, it is saying that if you're exporting one worksheet, it's different than exporting 2 worksheets. Not a problem. Fixed! Exclamation. The issue is with how the Excel buffer handles multiple worksheet. The correct sequence is populate buffer with header, create the book with right header sheet, clear the buffer, populate with lines, write the line sheet, close book, and download. Error occurred because I was trying to use select or add sheet and delete all in the wrong order. Now each worksheet is created and written separately with the proper buffer reset. Excellent. I'm impressed. It looks very authoritative. So, Control F5. Let's publish this. So, we initially couldn't create the workbook. Now it solved this problem because it figured out there's a difference between one worksheet and 2 worksheets in an Excel workbook. So let's go to that same order. And we have our 2 lines. Let's go to Actions, Export to Excel. So now it's prompting us to save this. I'm going to click Save. Okay. So now I don't have Excel on this machine. So let me just get this to sync with OneDrive and get this over to my other machine. Apologies for this semi-janky setup. I probably should get Office installed on this dev machine. It says it's synced. Okay. Now, another minor thing that's very common, almost every time I've tried this, notice the extension here, .xlsx.xlsx. Consistently does this. Okay, so let me just try a manual copy here. And let me fix the extension. And let me open this on my other machine. Okay, so let's pull this up in Excel and see what we've got. Okay, do you notice any issues with our Excel workbook with 2 worksheets? Well, the first problem we have is that there's only one worksheet. So there is only one worksheet named header. We do not have a lines or details or whatever, a second worksheet with the lines. The second issue is that everything is on the one header worksheet. We have our header data and we have our line data. This looks promising, but okay, you're close, but you're a little off. Okay, so let's go back to, let me move this back. Let's go back to Copilot and talk to Claude Sonnet and say the Excel file only has one worksheet called header. Also, both the header data and the line data is on the single header worksheet. Not a problem. We're vibe coding here. We're explaining the problem. It's going to solve it, right? So let me close this. And it's going to fix our problem. We're full of hope here in vibe code land. Happy accidents. Pulling a Bob Ross, not a problem. I see the issue. The Excel buffer needs to keep all data in memory and use sheet name tracking, whatever that means. Let me fix this. Great. Confident. Charges in. Solves our problem. That's what we need in an agentic AI developer. So it has edited our code unit and it's working away. Checked, no problems found. Updated the code to use enter cell method with explicit row column positioning and clear new row to properly separate the worksheets. This ensures both worksheets maintain their own data independently and are written as separate sheets in the Excel file. Okay, I don't know if that's right, but sounds pretty fancy. So let's click keep and let's republish. Let me just close a few tabs here. And so as vibe coders, we're just going along for the ride. We're delegating this task, asking the agent to get the work done, and it's identifying issues, it's making changes, it's finding the problems, it's pushing out code. Great. So here we are on our worksheet or our sales order, actions, export to Excel. Look at that. The record in table, Excel buffer already exists. Identification fields and values, row 1, column 1. I don't know what that means. I'm going to copy their details, click OK. Okay, clearly that approach did not work. So I'm going to exit. Let's go back to Copilot. Let's paste it in. So far, I'm like, oh, okay, typical, troubleshooting, debugging. And I'm just going to paste in this error. And I'm going to submit that back to Copilot and Claude Sonnet 4.5. It's going to review it. say, we could use a different approach where we specify the sheet name when entering cells. Let me read this. I see the issue, it says. The Excel buffer can't have two cells with the same row column coordinates. We need to use separate temporary instances or write each sheet separately. Let me fix this by creating and writing each worksheet individually. That sounds kind of familiar. I don't recall, but it's like it suggested this last time. Fixed. The issue is both worksheets were trying to use the same row column coordinates in the Excel buffer. Okay. The solution is to create and populate the header, write it as the header sheet, clear the buffer, populate the lines, write it as lines, close the download. Wait a minute. That sounds really similar to what it did last time, but okay. Now it gets its own clean buffer, preventing the duplicate cell coordinate error. Blah, blah, blah. So let's keep that. We're vibing. Control F5. Let's go. We're not worried. We have an AI to code. Starting to see a pattern here. Let's pull up our sales order. There we go. 2 lines, actions, export to Excel. Working on it. Oh, now we get a download at least. We don't get an error. So let me just fix this. Let's call this V2. Okay. And let's see if this actually syncs or whether I need to copy it over. Okay. Let me just copy it over and, oops, open it. And look at that. So now we have an Excel file. It downloaded successfully, but notice we have a header worksheet, only one worksheet. And instead of header data, we only have line data. At this point, I'm scratching my head like, wait a minute. What's going on here? Okay, I'm not giving up yet. I'm going to close this and let's try one more time. So actually, let me open that up so I can describe what the problem is to my trusty sidekick here. Okay, so the issue is the Excel file still only has one worksheet called header. And now the header worksheet only has line data. Okay. Let's be a little more explicit. The Excel file, I don't know if you can see that okay. Let's see. Can you see that okay? The Excel file should have 2 worksheets with header and line data respectively. Okay, how many rounds have we done? The user is sane, okay? That reminds me of when you get your car repaired. Customer states, right? That's like a standard language they use. Customer states, car is making noise. Perfect. This fix uses 2 separate temporary Excel buffer instances. Temp Excel buffer header, temp Excel buffer lines. This ensures both worksheets maintain their own data independently. The workbook is then created from a header buffer. Then both sheets are written sequentially to the same workbook. Try the export now. You should get both worksheets. Okay, whatever you say. Control F5. Let's do this. And this was fascinating that this became an AL design pattern that it just can't do. And I'm kind of giving it away, right? It simply cannot do this. So no matter how many times I tried, 10, 20 times, literally every hint I could give it, every recommendation. And if you've If you work with Excel buffers and Copilot, you will absolutely run into this error at some point. A .NET variable has not been instantiated, attempting to call dynamics nav open XML spreadsheet, worksheet writer, blah, 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 table Excel buffer, write sheet. Classic error. Share details, copy. Okay, so I'm just going to quit talking. I'm just going to paste this in. I'm going to go. You're getting the point here, right? So what will happen eventually is it's going to exhaust all of its ideas. It's going to run into errors. And then it's going to go back to the beginning and essentially, from what I could tell, modify the code unit the way it started with the original errors and original problems. And it's just going to go in this loop. And you may have heard the term du jour, Ralph Wiggum. So this is a technique by which you just keep telling the agent to do it over and over and over and keep fixing the problem until it figures out a solution. And people claim that this works. In this case, with AL, with a multi-worksheet Excel file, it doesn't work. I've tried this dozens of times. Great. We're going to Control F5. Let's see what this box of chocolates brings this time. Okay, so we've encountered lots of different permutations of this. Let me close the Excel file over here just in case it is successful. Let's go back here and let's go back to our actions and export to Excel. Okay, so we don't get an error. That's a plus. Let's go with V3 this time. Okay, save it out here and let me copy this. Okay, what do we got? You notice anything? We still have one worksheet called header, and we only have lines. Okay, I'm not giving up. I have full faith in our agentic Copilot. So the Excel file still only has one worksheet called header and the data, and that worksheet only has line data. Do you know how to resolve this issue? Okay, one last time, and then I'm going to take a different approach. So normally, after a few iterations, I'm normally able to deal with this, or it's normally able to find a solution. So I'm going to take a different approach, and that is to try and give it a hint. I was only able to find one blog post or article on this specific topic, which I think might be why it's having a hard time. The Excel table buffer appears to be a little bit quirky, and so it requires a very specific design pattern to get this to work. Now, it may not be hard, and seasoned AL developers may know how to do this in their sleep, but I, as a vibe coder, don't know how to do this. And as a result of the very limited training data, my guess is that Copilot is incapable of solving this problem. It just doesn't know how to do it. Okay, so it says, let me try a simpler approach that saves to separate files. So here's where it starts to get desperate. Watch this. So let's do keep. Okay, keep. Oh, and now it's getting an error. Let me do a simpler approach that saves to separate files, then combines them. Okay, the cloud compatible approach. So here, that may be a clue that it's confusing or trying to separate out on-prem BC or NAV with cloud BC online. Okay, thinking. I can see there's an extra closing brace, so it's dealing with some syntax errors. And it's starting to get a little desperate. It's starting to kind of go off mission here. Remove item. Oh, okay. Let's see what's going on here. Let me create the correct version. So it's recreating the code unit file. Maybe because I clicked keep too early. Unfortunately, Wow. Okay. I've discovered a fundamental limitation with Excel Buffer API in Business Central. And this is where I was like kind of freaking out, like, and questioning whether this was possible. It doesn't natively support creating multiple worksheets in a single workbook when using the standard Create New Workbook Write Sheet pattern. Each call to write sheet after delete all replaces the previous sheet rather than adding a new one. And I thought, whoa, I am in trouble if this is not possible. But then I realized, well, configuration packages can write to Excel workbook with multiple worksheets. Business Central is clearly capable of doing this. And I reached out to a developer and he's like, yeah, that's totally possible. So I'm like, who do I trust here? The Excel buffer in BC is designed primarily for single sheet exports. And now it's telling me to go a different path. Use a different approach like XML manipulation, separate Excel files, third-party library, or .NET interop, and you do not want to do .NET interop or Excel interop. Would you like me to implement an alternative solution? Okay, so let's intervene here. It has lost its way. I'm going to copy this blog post that talks about it. And unfortunately, it is not the greatest blog post because it uses screenshots for code and it also has a few mistakes. So it omits some things and there's a few lines missing. So it actually was challenging to use this blog post to get working code. But this is literally the only blog post I was able to find on the topic, and I searched. So it talks about this, and you notice the screenshots, very, very challenging. So I kind of give Copilot a little bit of a break here, but I'll say it is possible to use the Excel table buffer to export to a single Excel workbook with multiple worksheets. Please see this blog post for a code sample. I'm going to paste this in. Okay, hit go. And let's see. Now, I may just kind of push this along because we're at 30 minutes here, but I went to extreme measures. Let's see how this works. But if you'll notice down here in my agent, you'll see an entry called beast mode. And this is a technique used by a Microsoft employee. I forgot his name, Burke Holland. So Burke Holland developed this to really try and like whip the agent into shape and say, do not give up under any circumstances. It is possible. You got this. Search the internet, scour your documentation, try 10 times before trying an alternative path. It is basically like relentless prompt to say, you must do this. Okay, so I gave it the blog post now, and it says, I've updated the code unit using the correct pattern from the blog post. The key changes are, instead of just calling delete, you set current, select or add sheet, delete all. This is the proper sequence. Okay, try it now. Great. So here we are, Control F5. Okay, let's close that. So here we are back on our sales order list page, and let's go to Actions, Export to Excel. Great, promising. Let's call this V4. And let me jump over here, open it up, and wow. Okay, so it kind of worked. I was unable to get this to work no matter what. So in this case, giving it the blog post actually worked. I tried this several times and it was unable to do it. But in this case, we got really lucky and it pulled it off. Now, we have a blank line here. Not perfect, but this is vastly better than what I got before. And so let me just jump to the conclusion. In this case, it did work, but in all my prior attempts with Copilot, it did not work. So if you try to tell it to clean up this blank line, it may actually break, go haywire, go off the rails again, and you won't be able to recover. That's one possibility. Otherwise, it may go in the loop. So this is just an example of when you're doing something and it just can't solve it. So one approach that you just saw is feed it a reference that it can use. That reference could be a blog post. It could be another sample code file, something that works. And just in case, I did have these files ready. So I have a hand-coded version of the code unit that I got to work. And then I have a version that was created in Cursor. Cursor, you say? Yes. So what we found is, after I explained this to my junior developer, Franklin, he tried something interesting. Instead of trying what I tried, he took a different path. And he went to the Anthropic Claude website, and he uses this regularly for sample code. And he pasted in the request into the Claude website. It generated code, and he was then able to paste that into VS Code. He said that worked. And so he had one or two errors, just like I did. But then after that, Copilot was able to resolve it, apparently. So that's one approach. The second approach I did, once he told me that, I said, that's really strange that Copilot using Claude Sonnet would not work, but the Claude website using Sonnet, the exact same LLM, does work. So then I thought, well, what could explain that? So then I have a Cursor subscription. So I launched Cursor IDE. In theory, it should be the same. VS Code Copilot with Claude Sonnet LLM, Cursor with Claude Sonnet. Like, it shouldn't be that different. I don't know why I can't get it to launch. There we go. It's launching 2, I think. So Cursor here, with Claude Sonnet, you would think wouldn't be any different, but it was. It was successful. So Copilot failed, Claude website succeeded, Cursor, all with the same model, Sonnet 4.5, succeeded. So we spent hours on this, not because we needed to get it done, but because we're trying to understand what is this behavior that we're seeing. And as far as we can tell, our conclusion, or my conclusion, is that GitHub Copilot was fundamentally different in its behavior, even with the same model, than the Claude website and the Cursor IDE. So the common consensus is, well, VS Code, Cursor, Claude Code, whatever, you're using the same model, you should get the same results. Based on this example, I have found that to not be true. Like, it is definitive. If you try this, Copilot will just go crazy in circles over and over and fail constantly. You really have to guide it. By contrast, Claude or Claude Code or Cursor or maybe Google Gemini, I don't know, will have different results. So that was really fascinating conclusion of this experiment. So give this a try, and here's your prompt. I'd like to create an little extension, and you create an Excel file with 2 worksheets. I use the sales order page with header and line for those 2 worksheets. And then this is the blog post that I used for reference. It was literally the only one I could find, despite numerous attempts to search. madhda.com. And so that was the lesson. So with that said, let's wrap this up. Oh, how do I get back? Okay. So when AI fails, simple bugs happens all the time. You're going to get a syntax error, a linter error, something that needs a fix. Great. You just tell it to fix that problem. Not a problem. Logic flaws. Sometimes it assembles something incorrectly. I've had it confuse header rows, line rows. I've had it confuse reading a log file versus the actual tables. And Antidote in the comment says, I suspect the difference is hidden system prompts in the different IDs. I agree. I've been told, no, there's no difference. I disagree. There is clearly a difference in the implementation of GitHub Copilot in VS Code with Claude Sonnet than Cursor and Claude Sonnet. There is something behind the scenes that is subtly influencing it, or something in the training. I don't know exactly what it is, but I was told the exact same thing, that no, it'll behave exactly the same. It absolutely does not. And this is a really good, in my case, my experience, a repeatable test case that you can use to demonstrate the difference between GitHub Copilot and VS Code and other IDEs. And yes, I tried different models. Let's go back to channel 4 here. I tried Sonnet, I tried Opus, I tried GPT Codex, one of the codexes. I tried Max. I tried Beast Mode, as I mentioned. All had the same result. It eventually would get in circles and just encounter the same problem, and it would literally give up. So yeah, very, very interesting test case. So simple bugs, logic flaws, you can usually fight through that. You may need to guide it and understand what you're doing there. So kind of at the limits of a non-AL developer vibe coding. Bad design patterns. This is kind of one of them. Another bad design pattern I found is, gosh, what was I doing? I can't remember, but you're just looking into like, oh, it was updating multiple records. It was holding open one record as it updated other records, resulting in a chain of locked records that caused basically a deadlock. And so I just recently had to deal with that. Bad training data. I think that's what's happening here. Is it just, in this case, it doesn't have proper training data for this scenario. And I have had clearly bad training data where it's pulling in, old CAL examples. It's changing my JSON files to version 13 of Business Central. And so there I could tell it's clearly using old data by just blindly inserting that in my JSON files. I mentioned lack of training data. I think that's the case here. Refactoring complex code, that seems to be a common challenge. I don't know if that's VS Code specific or Copilot specific, but when you do a one shot to write your vibe code, your application from the beginning, it usually does better than if you give it a pile of code and you tell it to refactor complex errors. We've had some trouble with that, at least so far. Maybe they're improving that, but that has been a challenge. So these are the scenarios where it will fail. Just expect to deal with it, figure out methods to guide it, coax it, redirect it, give it some hints, give it some samples. It may not be able to magically solve all the problems on its own. So you may need to find a reference, give it the reference. Now, in this case, fascinating example, my junior dev, Franklin, he had working code unit code for this export in Excel. He pasted it into Copilot. Copilot said, this code is wrong. It proceeded to change the code to introduce a failure, and then it went off the rails. And so we literally had that situation with Copilot, GitHub Copilot in VS Code, where working code from Claude, VS Code then broke. So it's really interesting to see these behaviors. So a comment, in my opinion, the difficulty in AL vibe coding comparing to web vibe coding, yes, is that there is much more complex business logic behind that AI does not know about and too little code base comparing the web. Absolutely fantastic point. And if someone is vibe coding Node.js, NPM, Tailwind, whatever these other things are called, web development, and it's this greenfield development where I want to develop this simple web app, it's starting from scratch. It's building with no constraints, no limitations. There is no syntax or context to deal with. In BC, very good observation, it has to play by the rules of all this massive infrastructure in BC that is having to work within. It's having to follow all these, I'll call it implicit rules with Business Central. It's trying to figure that out. And it's then dealing with the AL language, which has a vastly smaller training data set available on the web, certainly for modern AL. And you can give it the BC code base, but as you may know, the BC code base has some really bad practices in it from the historical data. And Microsoft has some code that we simply cannot do if we're developing a PTE. They have some design patterns in BC that will not work with our PTEs or apps or SAPs. So it is a very different challenge. So we have to behave differently than people are like, oh, I use Claude Code to vibe code this amazing, startup web app. We don't have that freedom, unfortunately. So with that said, there are ways to deal with it, but just be prepared. You may have some stressful moments on a late night trying to deliver if you've made promises around vibe code, which is what I experienced. So I stressed. So what did we learn? So be patient. These things are not magical. It's not wave a magic wand. It solves all your problems. Try a different approach. Try a different model. Try a different agent design. Try a different platform. If it's not working for you on VS Code with GitHub Copilot, try Cursor, try Claude, try Gemini, try something else, a different tool. Even with the same model, you may get very different results. And yes, eventually AI will likely conquer it, but not every IDE, not every model, not every agent is going to behave the same. So just be flexible with it, right? You may need to hand code something. As scary as that may sound, especially for me, I had to hand code this Excel export code unit from that blog post, figure out how to get it to work. Took me like 5 or 6 tries to figure out what the mistakes or missing context was in that blog post. I was able to miraculously get it to work, wipe the sweat off my brow, and I pointed it to the sample and it was able to get working code. All of this is changing and improving rapidly, very fast. It's January 2026. VS Code just had a new release, which even changed the interface this morning when I got ready for this. I was like, wait a minute, something just changed in the chat window. So VS Code is constantly making changes. The models are changing. I don't know if, say, Sonnet 4.5, if the training ever changes, like will it improve with AL code or do we have to wait for a Sonnet 4.6 or 5.0? I don't know. But the behaviors are changing rapidly. So with that, don't give up. Don't be discouraged. You will run into situations where the AI just can't do it. So try different things. Just be flexible, be creative. And with that, go vibe code something, find a neat project, give this a try. See if you can get VS Code Copilot to just fail, give up, whatever, and then go through the exercise of trying to coax it on the right path or use a different tool. You'll learn a ton in the process of how to deal with these errors, not get discouraged, not get frustrated, and just get used to them. It's just the way vibe coding is. So cheers. Thanks for joining and hope this was helpful. Okay. Talk to you later.